My name is Pat Ferns, and I'm an independent producer from Canada, and I've actually been in the co-production game for over 40 years. What we decided to do this year is to look at co-production in a new way. At MIPTV, we're going to be looking at drama co-production, so if you're interested in that, come see us tomorrow in the auditorium. Today, however, we're looking at co-production by taking two case studies and also doing an interview with a key new player on the documentary scene. So I think I'll just quickly introduce our group. The first co-production comes from Germany and the United States, and we have Kristina Hollstein from ZDF Enterprises, we have Kathleen Cromley from Nat Geo, and we have Jens Monath from ZDF. And then we're going to have an interview with Sheryl from the documentary company, and then we have our Japan-France co-production with Sayumi, Horie, and Frédéric Fougea. So you've got treats in store. We'll have lots of illustration for you, and I think it's going to be interesting. But co-production means many different things. For many, it means simply co-financing or pre-sales, and that's really with one producer who's using a multiple number of sources of financing. But I think true co-production, and our cases represent this, is where there's a sharing of both creative, editorial, and financing elements. Now, this can be done through informal agreements, as I think is in this case, or you can do it under treaties which exist between different countries, and I've particularly specialized in treaty co-productions, most recently with Australia, where I did a series on Captain Cook and another on Charles Darwin. And it's interesting to see how you put all these elements together. In the case of Darwin, we had two broadcasters, ABC in Australia, CBC in Canada, two federal agencies, Screen Australia and the Canada Media Fund, two provincial agencies, Screen New South Wales and BC Film. And then we had the benefits that are available in both countries, producers offset in Australia and tax credits in Canada. So with 8 sources of funding and then a major pre-sale to Arte, we were able to generate $1 million an hour just from 3 markets. So that was interesting. Of course, there are challenges in co-production. We had to produce 3 different versions. The first in Canada was 4 times 43 minutes because they had commercials. Then we had 3 times 55 minutes for Australia. And then Arte wanted 5 episodes, so we had 5 times 43, and you had to completely reconceive the narrative arcs of the series to fit that. But we'll find out the challenges that our 2 teams of case study presenters have, and I'm going to begin with you, Kristina. So perhaps you could tell us how Dawn of the Oceans first came about. Where did the idea come from?
Now, hello?
Let's speak louder into it.
Yes, I can speak louder, but it doesn't work.
Just that?
Okay, I take this one. Good. So Dawn of the Oceans, when we were preparing this panel, we thought we choose a project where we don't only have different versions and different co-production partners, but where we have a very famous German novel that was very successful in Germany, but not already worldwide when we decided for the project, and where we have a project where we do have a German presenter, the writer of the novel, in the center of the story and even integrated into a huge part of the CGI that we have. So the idea came up in 2009. We had this series, The Best German, the most famous German and the best German book. And Frank Schätzing, with his book on The Swarm, was under the top 3. So Peter Ahrens, who is head of ZDF's cultural department, said, I'm looking for a new topic to do another big special, what we call super doc for German television. And he talked to Frank Schätzing, and they both developed the idea. And once we had the idea, we said, okay, this is a very good topic, it can be a great film, but we can't finance it alone because the budget was more than 3 million euros. And that was then after, when we already had a treatment, that National Geographic came in as a partner, and Arte came in as a partner. And it's really nice to have Sayumi here today, because NHK came in as another pre-sale partner, but further down the production line. So the principal thing with this production, what is interesting, is that we have this version with the German presenter, and National Geographic had to decide for a totally different version. And Kathleen was very hardly integrated into the production process. It's a Group 5 production. It's the production company who has a lot of experience in working together with international co-production partners. And I think perhaps that you all know what we are talking about. We would like to run first the clip of the German version so that you get to know our famous presenter.
Okay, if we could run the first clip, please.
In the beginning was the sea. The oceans distinguish our planet from all other heavenly bodies in space. Without the seas, this would just be one more barren lump of rock in infinity. No plants, no animals, and no people. And yet research into our oceans has only just begun. Many phenomena remain a mystery to science. How were the oceans formed over millions of years? What species fill the seas, and why? Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Frank Schätzing explores the breadth and depth of the oceans, a truly unknown universe.
The undiscovered universe is right at our front door. Oceans cover more than 2/3 of the surface of the Earth, yet we know less about them than distant planets. Strangest creatures are at home in the deep. Many of them still never been seen at all, because maximum 10% the oceans are explored. Now at last, scientists are trying to shine some light into the darkness. Let's link up with them. Join in with me on a journey through time and space. This 3-part series will look into the oceans of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. There are fantastic things to see down there. There's just one thing you gotta like: the water.
Eat or be eaten. The eternal rules of life and death hold sway in the ocean too. Light only penetrates through the upper layers. Beneath is eternal darkness and mysterious creatures. But what are all these species? And how do humans influence life in the depths? Now we are unlocking the last secrets of the oceans.
Oh, that looks absolutely terrific. Before we come to Nat Geo, I'm wondering, in the whole development process, you worked, your department worked with Group 5. Can you tell us a little bit about that development process?
The first thing you do, you start off with saying, you know, what is interesting for a broad audience when you talk about an issue as the oceans? And we've been into the universe, we've been into every part of the country, of the world, you know. So we said, all right, if we do something about the ocean, this can't be only about the ocean, it has to be combined with human beings, because we're human beings. So it's not a wildlife film, this is very important. It's a film that's how we deal with the oceans. And so it's a long process. To do a book like this, to write a book like this, takes a year. And it's up and down again, and it's, you know, we talk to our partners and they say, no, we need it a little bit different. So it's just a long process where we came up to that program.
And were you thinking about potential co-production partners at that stage, or were you just focused on the development of a great film?
Well, I think if you plan to do a project as big as this one, you from the first moment you think about co-production partners. And we thought about Nat Geo because we have a very good relationship to them. So first of all, yeah, you think about co-production because you know you're not going to make it without them.
Okay, and so is this a good time to bring you in, Kathleen? When did you first hear about this project?
Well, we first heard about the project about a year before we aired it. We aired it in August of 2010, and there was a fairly well-developed treatment at that point. We were extremely impressed with how ambitious the project was. It literally dealt with the past, present, and future of the oceans, and the production values were extremely high in every respect. We knew, though, that 3 hours would be too much for us, and we needed to pare it down to 2 hours. And our first challenge was removing the host, because although Frank Schatzing's very well known in Germany and in Europe, he's not particularly well known in the States. So we had to remove him, and then we felt like that our audience would be served best if we focused on the science and the history in the project. There's also a lot of ecological and future type stories. So I'll show the tease. You saw the other tease, which was more of the German version, and you'll see that in our tease we emphasize the history and the science, and the host is magically removed.
Okay, so let's run the next clip, please.
From the beginning, the oceans distinguish Earth from other heavenly bodies. Without them, our planet would be just one more lump of rock in the universe. Water covers more than 2/3 of the Earth's surface, with depths up to 7 miles below the waves. How did the oceans form our planet over billions of years?
We know so much from the experiments and from the observations coming out of scientific expeditions.
But these past expeditions also show how little we know about our ocean.
So I would say 10%, a sort of general idea, much less than 1% probably really know what's going on.
Now, today's technology is giving scientists the chance to explore its depths, to finally reveal the complete story of the oceans. Past, present, and future.
Well, terrific, again. Of course, the first few minutes of any production are really important, and what you have to make sure is that you are capturing the imagination of your audience, and you each had different values that you were seeking to reinforce with your respective audiences. So it's not about compromise, it's about actually knowing your audience and being able to find a way through to capture them. But come back to you, Kristina. I mean, at the point where this was developed and you were looking for partners, I mean, why did you go to Nat Geo first? Was this because of past relationships? You thought it would fit for their audience? Or what was the strategic thinking about making this a co-production?
I think one very important point was that we do have a very good and intensive relationship. And if you have such an ambitious project and you know that there are a lot of problems that you already know that they might occur during the production, you need some partners that know your work, that know the people you're working with, so you wouldn't try something like this with a totally new team of people. And I think this was one very important point. And then I think, you know, content-wise, you need a natural fit. And I think this is a topic that works very well for National Geographic. And from the clips you see, we have a 3-hour version for ZDF, and National Geographic decided to have a 2-hour version. So what was possible for you to do was to take all the science out of the 3-hour version and to do a compilation of this for your film. And you also already see it in the clip, because we have a bit of a different way of telling stories on the Sunday evening prime time slot, and I think as we had this big variety of material, it was possible to fit the two needs.
What was your pitch to Nat Geo when you actually went in? Did you give them a treatment, or did you just verbally kind of pitch it, or were there trailers or bits of material?
Of course, it was, in fact, it was both. There was a very detailed treatment, because there was already this developed idea between ZDF's department and Frank Schätzing. And then, of course, you know, we had a personal meeting, and it was a long meeting to explain what was ZDF's background. This is something, yeah, that you need then. We didn't need a clip at that time, because you know that looking at clips at the beginning, you can have a reference for the production company, but you can only take material from archives that just say nothing.
Okay, so then, yeah, I'd like to now, on the other side, what appealed to you when you heard they were doing this big budget production?
Well, we had worked with ZDF and with the production company that produced the film on previous productions, quite a few, but there was one in particular right before it called America Before Columbus, and so there'd been a long relationship, and we knew that the production values would be very, very high, and there would be tremendous attention to detail, both visually and also with the quality of the information, because certainly the quality of the information and the photography and the production values are something that, well, any broadcaster values, but I think National Geographic would probably do even above and beyond some of the others. So it really was a, I'm sure, very easy pitch, because we knew what we would be getting into for the most part, and it was a very good fit for us. And except for the host, and we felt like, well, we could work around the host.
So we've heard all the good news about how easy it is to collaborate. Were there challenges in this during the production or post-production in order to actually make sure you each got what you wanted from this?
Well, we were able to determine early on what we would have to do, which was very, very fortunate. But it did require a lot of time on our end once we received the program. We didn't make or attempt to make a lot of changes in the course of the production, because the editorial direction had been so cleanly established early on. But we spent about 2 months with an in-house producer reworking the program to condense it, to combine sequences, to change the chronology somewhat. And then that required a lot of new audio work, and of course re-tracking it with a different narrator. So there was a lot of time spent on our end, and that really was the challenge with, and usually is with a project like this, where you're not really directing the editorial at the beginning, you're retrofitting something to work after the fact.
You're trying to do sort of course adjustments as you go through. Jens, were you at the sort of interface between Nat Geo and Group 5, or?
Yeah, well, actually it was Roos Omphalius, who is a member of our department, but I did a lot of co-production, so I'm always, you know, trying to help wherever I can, okay? And I think the main thing about doing co-production is bringing together different cultures. I think that's, for me at least, the main thing about co-production, which gives me the most fun. If I worked with Fred on a co-production for French and German TV, it would certainly be different, because French TV is different to American TV. So I think this is the biggest fun of the whole thing, is getting together with different people from different countries and make it work for different countries, yes.
Okay, let me ask you the awkward question. If this had been co-produced with France, how might it have been different? Or did you see early on the US was the right place to go for this kind of co-production?
Well, I would say if I did it with Fred and for French TV, it would be a bit slower, I would say, you know. I'm wrong. No. Slower, a bit slower. No, sorry. But I did co-productions with French TV. Well, I did co-productions with French TV, and the problem we sometimes have is that it's a bit slower. Not Fred's program, they are very quick, of course, but other programs tend to be a little bit slower. Oh, sorry about that, Fred.
Well,
how slow do you find German programs?
Well, they're picking it up. They're picking up the pace, but we're often faulted for just wanting things too fast, and that is often where the adjustments are made, is shorter sound bites and just quicker pacing on how the stories are told and rolled out. One of the big changes we made, I forgot to mention, is although the writing, we had an English version script was fantastic, there was just too much. So we thinned out the narration quite a lot, and that seems to be the trend now for us, is far less narration, fewer words.
I think now it's often in post-production that you actually marry the cultural differences. Can you just walk us through a little bit about the editing process and did you have separate editing teams?
Okay. Yes, the program was completed, it was edited in Germany, and I made one trip or maybe I think it was two, just to see how it was going and meet the producers and see how the direction of the CGI, which was extensive. And essentially, again, it was very, very well thought out in advance. So we basically took the final program and then reworked it to what would work for us.
Now, you mentioned the CGI, and there was also some dramatic recreation in this, wasn't it?
Yes, there's just beautiful, beautiful cinematic quality recreations, which was one thing that we knew were going to really work for our audience, and we actually have a clip of one of them, which also demonstrates some of the historical nature of the show and some of the great discoveries that have been made by different explorers and scientists in terms of learning about what's at the bottom of the ocean.
Okay, if we could run the next clip, that would be great.
500 million years later in the Canadian Rockies, because these mountain peaks were once at the bottom of an ancient ocean. It's August the 30th, 1909. Snow is already falling in the mountain. Charles Doolittle Walcott and his wife Helena have been riding for days, pursuing their shared passion, fossil hunting. Walcott has never been to university, but in his long career he will head his country's greatest scientific institutions, the U.S. Geological Survey, the Smithsonian Institution, and the American Association for the Advancement of Science. It's been a disappointing trip. They found nothing of note.
Charles, hold on!
What's the matter?
Chester refuses to do another step.
It's another 12 kilometers to the next homestead. At nightfall, they'll have to stop and spend another night in the open.
Come on, old boy, what's it?
He could lead the horse round the obstacle, but with the reflex of an old fossil hunter, he turns over every stone. Thanks to an obstinate horse, he's about to make one of the most significant discoveries of his life.
Helena. Get down and look at this.
Walcott christens this fossil Marella the Magnificent.
Terrific. What we're going to do is we're going to put that on hold for a moment. There was a very important 360-degree sort of digital strategy with it, and perhaps we'll bring that in at the end when we talk about how the Japanese-French co-production handled the challenges of new digital media. But next I'm going to turn to Sheryl Crown, who's the founder and principal of the documentary company and has a new fund to help fund documentaries. Sheryl, you've had a varied background in, try that microphone. You've had a varied background in the theater, in drama, in feature films. What brought you to documentary?
I think there are some fundamental similarities between any of the genres, and that's about story. So, I mean, it seems to me that there are stories that need to be told, whether they're in fact or fiction. So after years of working in fiction, which is sometimes, you know, unbelievably terrible, we thought we might look at sort of fact and look at the ways in which documentary features in particular seem to be getting out there and reaching a market. And I think there are some fundamental stories that need to be told and could be told, and that's why really a way of telling important stories that reach a wide audience.
I mean, for many people, there's been a feeling that with the rise of reality television, that the documentary was somehow endangered. Certainly there was that feeling in North America, and it's really heartening that somebody has sort of moved into the space and said, yes, there's real opportunity with documentaries, and particularly documentaries for the big screen.
I think that, I mean, you guys probably know a lot more about this than I do, so I don't claim to be any sort of expert, but even from the other side of it, watching the ways in which documentary features have become so popular, and in a way, there's a hunger and an appetite for them. So what happened with my particular partners in the fund, in Britain, there is a sort of tax scheme which is called an EIS scheme, and people have been putting EIS schemes together for fiction features. So we thought, well, why not do it for documentary features? It's now becoming a proven, recognizable genre. And actually, because the budgets on the whole tend to be lower, there's more chance of maybe recouping your investment, which is what these EIS funds are about. So the good news is, yes, we are a source of funding and we have some money. The bad news is we have to make that money back and some. So if we're going to survive and continue to be able to put money into your films, we need to have films that can be commercial, not just have a cultural significance.
Okay, so say I'm a British producer, and we'll move outside Britain in a minute. I come to you with a great documentary idea. I've maybe got a broadcaster who'll pay for some back end, or maybe got a theatrical distributor. What can your fund offer me, and what would your terms be?
Well, as I said, first of all, we're looking for stories that are universal, however small they might seem at the beginning, that there's a genuine feeling from the filmmakers that this film will sell around the world. So fundamentally, we're, of course, looking for a great story, small or big, that the world wants to see or should see in an entertaining way. So let's accept that the creative needs to be pretty good, and we are fairly discerning, but we trust you as filmmakers. We look for track record of the filmmakers, whether they're directors or producers or production companies, so we can look at your body of work. So we'll be open to great ideas that can travel. On the financing side, it's quite important to us that we can see a return on the money, as I've just said. So we would need there to be an international sales agent attached who's given us a set of estimates, which I know in documentaries is sometimes a very difficult thing to achieve. But we're finding with some of the projects that are coming to us that they are coming with sales agents, they are coming with estimates, or they're coming with finance plans that can demonstrate 120% return on our money. Our money would have to...
Is that 120 or 125?
120%.
120,
I
so
think
you
it's
need
120, yeah. We need to be able to show, at least on paper, we all know this is a risk industry, but I can't justify this to my investors if it's looking like we're never going to make our money back. However passionate we might feel about the project, sadly, we can't do it. However, you know, we are commercial with a lot of heart, so we'll try and look at ways of making a deal work so that For example, even though we'd look to come out in a first position, but in some finance plans, we understand that we couldn't. We'd come out pro rata pari passu with other equity investors. We'd look for deals where there's a lot of broadcast money already in there, but there's still enough money to recoup from the rest of the world. We will try and work with you if we really love it, but the bottom line is we have to do a deal that works so that we can continue to flourish with you and make good documentary features.
So say I had $1 million documentary, BBC was giving me half the budget, I had a sales agent that showed you'd make 120%. Can you put up the rest of that financing?
We can't put, our cap on investment is £150,000, so we wouldn't put up the 500,000. We'd certainly be in a position to put up 150 if we loved it and the figures worked, yes.
Okay, now say I'm not a British producer and cannot use the tax credits and mechanisms there. I'm a French producer. If there's sort of collaboration within Europe, can you still work with me?
I think it's like fiction co-production or any other co-production. Clearly, if there are official treaty co-productions, it's better all round because we can justify our investment. We can also, countries are eligible for their tax credits. And for us, the tax credit becomes a very useful point of recoupment because we can already be ahead of the game. We take a share in the tax credit. So as long as countries can bring with them an equivalent tax credit, if we can do it under an official co-production treaty or a convention that works, then we will look at that. I mean, it's also possible that if the budget is very low and you're asking us for a tiny bit of completion money that's not going to break the bank, and we can also show that we'll make the money back, we might try and help. But really what's best for us is official co-production treaties or convention treaties. Also, clearly there needs to be some element that then works as the co-production treaty. We're not looking at Euro puddings as in the old days where everything failed. So we would be able to hopefully work with anybody who has treaties.
So if I was doing a co-production between Canada and the UK, that would fit in nicely to your arrangement?
It would be possible. We'd need to look at it. You know what lawyers are like. They might find something that's a problem, but we'd try and work with you to solve it. But at the moment, my lawyer has briefed me to say it's possible. So, and that's why we're here, clearly. We'd like you to know there's some equity out there. We'd like you to know it's pretty tough equity. I know it won't work for everybody, but we do try and make it work. I mean, can I just say something about story?
Sure. Yep.
I mean, if you look at our website, there's a website which is www.documentarycompany.com. It's as easy as it gets. There's a very, very clear presentation of the sorts of films we're looking for and the sort of criteria you need to be able to establish with your project before we'll look at it and get involved in a meaningful dialogue. So, please do look at the website and see if there's anything that you think matches both our creative and our commercial terms.
And so co-productions are part of your world. And
yeah, we'd like it to be.
Be able to fund those. Well, that's terrific. And again, www.documentarycompanyinfo.com.
Yeah.
Okay, so
thank you.
Thanks for bringing us that good piece of news, Sheryl. We appreciate that.
Okay, I'll be around the rest of the day, so if you think there's something that you want to chat to me about, please do.
Okay. And now we're going to move on to another case study. This is the Volcano Devils, and delighted to have Sayumi and Frédéric here. Sayumi is, NHK is a really important player. I was just at the Asian side of the dock, and I must say that that whole region looks to NHK as the model co-producer. And Frédéric's films I have seen for many years, and they are neither slow nor boring. They are wonderful and entertaining. But tell me, Frédéric, tell us about the origins of wanting to do the Volcano Devils.
Well, that's interesting. What is interesting is, in fact, that initially we had the idea of making a story about two fantastic scientist adventurers who had died in Japan, and they were volcanologists and they died on a volcano, and we initially wanted to tell their last days to understand why they died on the volcano. They knew the volcanoes. And I came here in MIP in 2007. I met with Sayumi and Katayama-san, who is a producer on HK. I showed them a clip. We had edited a little clip. And they said, this is very interesting. This is an incredible story to us as well. And I didn't know at that time that this tragedy in Japan had been a very important moment in recent Japan history. And what happened next is that through our cooperation, the project changed. That is, it was not anymore the 5 last days of the crafts happening, but it was for an HK an occasion. An occasion to come back on a tragedy that was not well digested, maybe something. I mean, it was a complicated tragedy for Japan. Maybe you should.
Yeah, you tell us, Sayumi. Do you need a microphone?
I think that
you
I
got
have a
one.
smaller
Okay,
one.
good.
This is the 28th year from the tragedy, and we lost 43 people in the local people and also media people in that catastrophe from the volcano eruption. So it was obviously a very important, catastrophe for all of us. Volcano is different from the earthquakes. Volcano always warn us, and the scientists are, keeping collecting data. So in comparison with the earthquake, it should be easier for us to know when it comes and how people behave when it comes. But obviously, because we lost 43 people on site, and this was a failure in a sense to predict the loss of the lives. And NHK was there, and other media people were there, and 2 out of 43 was an NHK cameraman and its assistant. And actually, the cameraman I knew very well, a friend of mine, so that was shocking to me too. But anyway, so this was the failure in a sense, in terms of the purpose of existence of NHK and other media to protect the life from the natural disaster on site. So although the scale of the incident was much smaller than the most recent earthquakes in Japan, this story was really special for us. So, but obviously it was really difficult one to look back because NHK was involved and we lost our lives, but we were responsible for the local community at that time because we were on site. So that was a complicated, story. And then Fred brought us this wonderful proposal, and he suggested us to come on board and look back the story through the French point of view, through the existence of the French scientists. And we thought that could work, although 3 parties like media, local government, and scientists, and local people they have all the touchy issues, and it's difficult for each party to go back. So we courageously, decided to come on board.
And I believe that when you started to add the creative elements, and it really was a joint effort. There were elements of French and Japanese crew. And
I think the DNA of the project itself is mixed, because we had a lot of information of the French part story, and we got into the Japanese character story, the destinies, and we had to weave together combined stories of all these destinies crossing each other in a tragedy. And from that, all this information came also the style of the movie, which is very specific. I mean, we had archives from the craft, archives from the Japanese television. It didn't match. We didn't have all the elements to tell with archives. And we said, we're going to rewrite and reenact what is not in the archives and set it up all together. So we have a film that is very original in terms of craft.
Would this be a good time to look at the
craft? Because you'll see we've made things so that you can't really make the difference between the archives and the reenactment. We've shot the reenactment like newsreel.
Yep. Okay, let's take a look at the Volcano Devils.
Nani? What did he say?
He said that we have to leave now. The neighbor will be out soon. Okay. もうちょっと写真撮ってます。
私が行ったのはもう4時は過ぎてたんじゃないですかね。
はい、しろ。こちら農業研修所。応答願います。応答願います。どうぞ。そちらの状況はどうなってますか。応答願います。
ちょっとやっぱりいつもと違うなっていうことは
これ今までで一番大きいんじゃないか。
もう一つのクルーに車をつけてなかったんです。一旦ここに集まる。
もう逃げたか。逃げたかね。
まだです。
ずっと下がっとけ。近くまで来てるの。そこまで。
逃げましょう。逃げましょう。
みんなに連絡を。一刻も早く。
車に戻ったら無線がすごいんですよね。
何かが燃えるような匂いが立ち込めてきました。
その発生した直後、それを見たときに私は総員撤退と。
川にいるクルーを拾って戻れ。了解了解。
総員撤退。総員撤退。
雨に打たれて、お二人がカメラを構えているというのは非常に印象的な後ろ姿でした。
Okay, it's too dangerous now. We have to go. It's too dangerous. We have to go.
下ったところがもうそのままおーっともう後ろから押される形でバイクがグラグラとしたもんですから、あらこれは火砕流だろうっていう感じで。
So, absolutely terrific material. Do the Japanese and the French versions differ, and was that something you talked about during production, or did that emerge in post-production?
In the end, we have two versions, but there was about, I think, 17 different scripts being written, with 5 screenwriters in France and 4 in Japan, and we're exchanging scripts for 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
So
2.5 years.
Yeah, 2.5 years.
But when you finally got to start shooting, there was pretty much consensus between you?
Yes, there was one only definitive script.
One definitive script.
Yeah. The editing will change a little bit.
Yes.
Because the details.
It's just the percentage of the interview with the scientists and a little bit of the narration, background narration, and the drama. But we will adapt most of the drama sequences from this one definitive script.
Yeah, it's often the way is the dramatic recreation, big high production value element, or CGI, and you keep that the same, but then you work other material around it. And which version are you selling around the world, or you will be selling around the world?
In fact, it's already a large co-production, because National Geographic is also a co-producer, and a number of countries in Europe. ZDF nearly was nearly a co-producer, but I don't know. So it's not a question of selling, but we're mostly selling the kind of French version, which is 90 minutes, and a shorter version we've edited of 75, and another shorter version of 50 minutes, so it's different.
Tell me a little bit about the post-production process. Where did you edit, in France or in Japan or both?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, NHK actually for this production, this is really rare that how deeply NHK staffs and Japanese crews were involved. We financed the research in Japan and 1 month shooting in Japan, which was the joint filming crew. And a part of post-production, and we used the NHK orchestra to record the music. I think that music was really great.
Yeah, it was recorded in Japan.
Yeah.
And one very interesting detail, we made a double disc of images. That way we were editing in Paris, and we'd send the edit list to Tokyo, and they would have already or editing with the same, live,
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
The wonders of modern technology.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, I'm finding co-producing with Australia, they can do an edit, send it to me, go to bed, and by the time they wake up in the morning, they've got all our notes.
Exactly.
It's actually, we move along faster rather than slower because of co-production. So wondered if we could, in terms of budget, was this broadly a sort of equal participation between Europe and Japan?
Yeah, I would say.
I think in the end, that's kind of the equal.
Yeah.
So it really was a case where you had to find consensus and agreement. Were there times in that 2 years of writing scripts that you thought, this is just too difficult?
Many times. Many times.
Actually, yeah, many times.
Yeah, they were discouraged at some point. They said, Frédéric, you're useless. No, we had to change. We had to adapt to a way of thinking, a way of telling stories, a way of perceiving the events, and the accuracy. They were so tight on the accuracy of every detail. Everything we. I don't know if the French are slow, but we're a bit taking some liberty with some details.
You were concerned with the truth, and they wanted the facts.
Yeah, we wanted the accuracy because at the first stage, this is not a cultural difference. We had a difference in terms of the distance from the events. We were involved, and that was 20 years ago, but we really remember the whole story. And many times we repeated the story through the documentaries, and the Japanese viewers are aware of the facts and the stories. While his team were really good in following up all the details, but it took some time to catch up with details of the accuracy or the story itself. We have 2 different distances at the first stage, but it was amazing that how fast they were catching up with. And they sent his director, and he himself went to the local place, the Unzen and Shimabara, and to collect the stories. We interviewed 80 people, and we screened up 500 hours archives together. So gradually, during the 2 years' time, our distance will be smaller.
And Frédéric, do you feel you've told the story you wanted to tell at the outset now in this film, and it's a better film because of all that struggle?
Yeah, I think we've learned a lot from the Japanese perspective, and I wouldn't have told the story initially like this, but what they brought in terms of perception of events, and it's fascinating actually the logic of the Japanese organization and the system of decision, which we didn't know actually before entering into the subject. We got to understand, you know, how Japanese are related to Earth, how do they manage catastrophe, and we learned that through the process, and I think it's in the movie, and it's very interesting because it's totally different from our perspective.
So it became a more complex and layered
film
exactly. As a result of the collaboration. So I'm wondering if I can turn now to the whole business of, we not only have seen two terrific films, but in the world we live in now, you actually have to connect with audience in all kinds of different ways. Tell us a little bit about your online strategy. I mean, have you got websites, and have you got ways in which the audience can engage in this film beyond just watching it?
Well, for the online strategy for this program, that we haven't done anything for this particular project yet. Probably when we decide on the air date, which was decided, but it's postponed because of the recent events. So we don't know when it would be aired in Japan. But I think more importantly, this is for the local community. We used already the edited program and shared with them in terms of the local viewing and the local information sharing, and we have got very good reactions. So probably when we are closer to the air date, we'll make some website
and in France.
Our usual Facebook and interactive things and portals, but it's true that we were about to start the promotion of the film when the disaster happened in Japan, so we're waiting for...
You're waiting as well.
Proper time to...
Okay, well, can I ask a little bit about the online strategy for Dawn of the Oceans? We'll try this one. The red one.
I think, yeah, okay. Everybody's talking about 360 degree, and I think this is a very, I don't only think, this is a very important point for us, not only for distribution, but also for the broadcaster. That starts with the sort of rights that you have to secure for your programs, but it also means in terms of timing that you need contact to other colleagues in your co-producer's company. So, for example, on the Dawn of the Oceans, we had the problem that National Geographic aired 3 months earlier than ZDF. And ZDF only starts really working on the online promotion once the programs are ready, so we know what sort of material we have. And especially on this program, ZDF had planned a very new and sophisticated 3D application for the internet. This was very expensive, we put a lot of work on it, and it was such a pity that because of timing, we weren't able to share this application with National Geographic. So I think that for the future, this is a point where we all need to pay attention and where we need to, to talk to other people in the channel, because also in our channel there are other departments involved, but to bring them in, and they are very happy to be brought in. When I was last in Washington, I met your colleague Matt, who is responsible for online for your service, and he said, oh, this looks great what you did. We should have talked about it beforehand. And I think especially for the producers, this is a very important tool also later for distribution. We see that our clients, they are very happy when they can share microsites, websites, or this sort of applications, because it gives the program another sort of promotion and publicity. And very often, it's a question of good timing.
It's timing and money, but tell us a little bit about Nat Geo. Generally, what's your strategy on trying to do multi-platform online?
Well, I know that we require a list of deliverables from our producers that practically eclipses the program itself for creating so many different kinds of non-broadcast platforms. We do video blogs with producers and experts, and written blogs with experts, and image galleries and photo galleries, and deeper factual information with web facts. And we get all that going pretty early. So depending on the program and what's available, we'll try to just build that out, and it's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, as you all know. And of course, social media, we're now into that world as well. So I think as producers, those demands are increasing, but it's really important because there are just so many people now, we feel, who are going to the web to experience the program or some part of it. And we hope then that translates into watching the broadcast, but either way, the program is getting out there.
Yeah, I think as audiences fragment, we have to often be going out and chasing them rather than assuming that they're coming to us. So some form of digital engagement is great. We've got 3 minutes left. Is there anyone in the audience who has got a question they would like to put to either of our case study teams or to Sheryl? We've got a question here. Do you want to speak loudly, or we'll find you a microphone? There's a microphone.
Blue one. Good. Tell me, financing. We try to put our program on YouTube and stuff. Do you think that it's a loss of income because they will not watch your program, or eventually they will not buy the DVD because they already seen on YouTube?
For me, you're talking
yeah, you've got your mic there.
Yeah. Well, I guess we hope that there's a synergy, to all of it, that people, they're going to YouTube and looking at the clips, and that's prompting interest in the broadcast. I don't know whether or not there are probably people who just go to YouTube, they see the clip, and they think, oh, great, I've seen it. No one knows that yet, really. But I think that if there's a strategy, it's just trying to get out there everywhere to cover as much as you can, so you'll capture as many people as you can. Does that answer it?
Partially, because I'm afraid to put my own program on YouTube because I see my kids and they don't pay, if I can say so. And Mr. Mitterrand tried to do something for music, and I'm afraid that if I put my program on YouTube now, why somebody will pay to see it again, maybe in a better format, but that's a big question.
That's a huge issue throughout the whole industry, quote, giving programs away for free, whether it's Hulu or any of these other sites that can broadcast something. So I honestly, I don't know what the answer is, what to tell you there, because you run that risk.
But maybe your kids' generation wouldn't tune in to watch the thing on television, but they may, in fact, discover it in another way. So I think what we're seeing is there are different audiences on different platforms, and our challenge is how many of them we can all knit together in one place. Anyway, we've had a good discussion. We've run out of time, but before we do that, I'd like to thank the organizers for all their help. I'd like to thank our technicians for being so superb. I'd like to thank you for coming, and please join me in thanking our panel.